You could say my feelings about this black suited Spider-Man is tight. I was going into messing around with this figure very reluctantly, because if you guys have seen my past couple of Marvel Legends figures predominantly on Spider-Man, you'd understand why, because there was just so many reservations I was kind of starting to build myself up with due to some QA issues with Spider-Man 2099, or some articulation problems, or even some design flaws that I just really wasn't vibing with in prior Spider-Man that I've covered in the new retro card Marvel Legends line. Well, they finally decided to tackle the black symbiote suit Spider-Man here, from which he has the symbiote suits. He's not full on Venom, but he is being influenced. And this is a very classic look to Spider-Man. So I thought to myself, okay, I definitely want a black and white version of the symbiote suit Spidey on top of the regular one that we're probably gonna have later on this year in that double pack. So this has to be nailed, all right? This has to be a good figure. And as I unbox him, holy shit, I'm right. Holy God, I am just so over the moon by the sheer fact that not only is this one of the better Marvel Legends that I've played around with so far, this is probably my favorite one. I'm sorry, Cyborg Spidey, but you've been dethroned. So obviously he's gonna be the symbiote suit Spidey, and therefore he's not gonna have an awful lot of actual detailing going along the costume, because it's literally just all black with the white symbiote logo on the front and on the back. But the actual paint application behind said symbiote suit is definitely not held back. You can see right there that it pretty much takes up the entire portion of the torso, both front and back, as it kind of it curls its way with the little legs here as it kind of connects towards the back. It just looks very, very beautiful. And it also stands out more due to the fact that the paint that they used for the symbiote suit, the symbiote logo, is kind of like glossier white versus the matted black that's pretty much making up the plastic for the majority of the figure here. The only other exceptions are these little white stripes that are very vintage black and white symbiote suit Spidey here on his hands, as well as, of course, the signature white eyes on his face. But everything else, as far as color, just, very, very simplistic. Of course, there's not much that you can really do, because this is meant to be a much more vintage look at the black symbiote suit Spider-Man. But because of that, it just looks really, really well. What also helps complement in a way that I just wasn't expecting it, because I gotta be honest, I was a little apprehensive when I saw some of the promo photos, but over time, I really warmed up to this look, to his musculature. They went for the beefier, super stacked, super yoked version of the symbiote suit Spidey, which again, it kind of makes sense, because this is supposed to be a suit or a symbiote that amplifies his powers. And you can definitely see it amplifying his thick thighs here, as well as the bulging biceps and triceps amongst his arms, and the musculature along the abdomen and chest area, as well as his back, all the trapezoids, all the stuff. But again, it's very reminiscent of the vintage look for symbiote suit Spidey. In later portions, they started to kind of give him amplified musculature, a bigger body build. They didn't go full Venom, but I noticed the changes that they were inflicting, and it looks like this is a combination of the two. So I like the blending of the two styles. It definitely works for Marvel Legends. And because he's got the much bigger physique, the head doesn't feel as bulbous as it has done with other Marvel Legends that I've covered so far. It actually matches the proportions. It's got that clean matte black look along with the white eyes. Again, very simplistic, nothing too intricate as far as detail, but it really works. There's even a couple little things here and there that I noticed that I thought were kind of interesting. When we kind of go to the back here, there's a couple of little bumps on his spine here. I don't know if it's meant to be like his spine protruding there because of how much it's having an effect on his physical well-being, but it's also adding to his chaps, specifically his ass right there, as the costume kind of stretches there. I just thought it was an interesting detail. Yes, I'm checking it out from that perspective, because I find it interesting that they went ahead and added the little molding of the detail of the costume being stretched there amongst his cheeks. I don't know, it's quirky, but I love it. What I don't love is that, much like some other Marvel Legends, I don't know if they kind of repeated some blueprint detail here, but I don't like the duck feet making a return here in symbiote suit Spidey. They're back again with this kind of design. It's a little more pointed than it's been in the past, so it's a little bit more natural looking to a regular shoe, but it's still reminiscent of that duck feet from prior versions like the black and white negative suit Spidey or the 2099 Spidey. But just the rest of the figure just feels so good in terms of molding, sculpting, again, the paint, as well as the actual coloring of the plastic they used for the matte finish of the black. I just cannot speak too fondly enough of it because it just feels great in hand. He feels like a very legit figure. He feels even premium. This is probably one of the few Marvel Legends where I can actually look at that inflated price that was much different than it was in the past. You know, before they used to cost only like $10, maybe $15, and now we're pushing it to like $22, $23. Some of the most recent Marvel Legends that went up for pre-order are now going for like $27. This is arguably one of the few where I can look at that $23 price tag and go, you know what? Worth it. And if the design and look of the character wasn't enough, then the articulation certainly is. The head has that hinge that I have praised in prior Spideys of the Marvel Legends retro card line, where it's got the ball joint that is naturally gonna let it rotate 360 degrees, as well as being able to slide up and downward very generously due to the hinge on the back of his neck that you can very clearly see right there. I don't know if this is meant to be a happy accident or if it's an isolated thing on mine, but mine can actually tilt its head slightly. It's not the most fluid of movements, but it can slightly tilt to the left, to the right. The only reason why I say it might be an accident or just an isolated thing is because when I did it, I did hear a pop, so I can't tell if it was intended and it just hasn't moved properly and therefore that caused the popping noise, or if I wasn't really meant to force it that way and I might have accidentally broken something in there that now allows this. But I'm gonna go ahead and perceive it to be the former only because it feels good. You know, it feels tight, feels snug, but it doesn't feel overly frustrating. It actually tilts rather nicely. So the head is doing an exceptional job. Then we get to the shoulders where it's able to naturally move vertically 360 degrees in a ratcheted position, no less. Both joints at the top, ball joint for the shoulder, it feels ratcheted when moving it vertically 360 degrees. Not much in the form of extension. I noticed that when I extend the arms to the sides, I don't really get as much as I would have hoped, especially when moving them upwards. You can kind of see right there, it stops right about the, I don't even want to say the 90-degree angle. I want to say more so like the 80 or 75 degree. And that was a little bit of a bummer. But thankfully, the reason why is because right here, we have that very beautiful hinge joint that allows the arm to move forwards and backwards very, very far for fluid extension, as you can see right there on both shoulders, and looks awesome. And what's cool too is that they went the extra mile of painting some additional leg white paint applications right there on the back, so it's able to line up with the back white symbiote symbol and being able to give you the proper distinction of where to put the arm when it's resting. So you can kind of see it right there line up with the rest of the legs, and at the same time when you fully extend it to the front, you can see even more paint applications coming through right there. So that was a very cool little piece of attention to detail. Then we get to the bicep swivels with the massive biceps that are able to fully rotate 360 degrees right about right there. And then the elbows have two joints right there in the middle. I do feel like they're a little bit on the stiffer side, but in the negative way, where I do feel like can't believe I'm saying this, but I think it's because of the sizing of that very bulgy bicep that actually kind of constricts the amount that it's able to bend the arms up. I distinctly remember this being the exact joints that I would find in the other Marvel Legends, and yet those other ones were able to more fluidly move or bend the elbows all the way up, and this one just can't because it's just how massive his gains are. But there is still some movement found in both of those joints, and then when moving over to the wrists, because of the way that both the wrists as well as the hands are designed, you're able to fully rotate the wrist 360 degrees on its axis, as well as activate the hinge joint in the middle of the wrist that is able to bend it downwards like so, and then upwards like that. Now let's talk about arguably my favorite joint out of this entire figure. If things weren't already blowing me away enough, we get to the torso. God damn, can we please get more Marvel Legends to do figures with these joints in mind? Please, for the love of God. I'm really, really hoping that we get something of this capacity in the rest of the Marvel Legends that are dropping later this year, because by God, this thing right here just makes this figure shine all the more to me. So we not only get one, but two joints here in the middle of the torso. One of them is a traditional ball joint here in the middle of the torso. You can kind of see the cut right about right there across his abdomen. And the reason for that is because you're able to rotate the top portion of his body 360 degrees, but it's also able to extend far back like that. You do see a little bit of gappage going on right there in the middle of the torso, but then he's able to crunch a little bit towards the front right there. And if that wasn't enough, he's able to then move from side to side amongst that top joint. So it's very, very fluid in almost a full 360 degrees all the way across, like you see before you right there. But if that wasn't enough, you do have that hinge joint that you can very blatantly see there down towards the part of his waist that's able to extend further back via a ratcheted click right there, but also crunch forward. So he's able to then do a double crunch almost all the way forward like that. So there's so much that you can really do with these two joints in mind. And for the symbiote suit Spidey no less, they give him, not only does this amplify his physique, it amplified his articulation on top of that. When we get to the legs, it becomes a bit more on the traditional side, but they take some of the better cuts and joints, if you will, from the prior Marvel Legends in a great way, honestly. Of course, we got the top leg joints right here that are able to extend forwards about that far. Not much going back because of the way that I missed this. The very intricately detailed butt sculpt really is right there. You can see right there that the legs obviously stop right up at that point, but they're able to extend to the sides very frivolously. They stop pretty short of the 180 kind of area, but at least they do a fascinating job of extending right about right there. Then, before we can even move on any further, you'll notice that there are thigh cuts right there amongst the bulging top portion of the thigh that are able to rotate 360 degrees. And what I love most about it is that they're not loose, but they're not very tight either. They're like the perfect amount of, so to speak, snugginess, in a way where I'm like, yes, this feels satisfying. It doesn't feel loose, but it doesn't feel too tight that I'm going to break it. It's like the perfect amount. It's crazy. I know it's a very weird thing to say, but those thigh cuts are actually, what do the kids say these days? They're sending me. Dear God, I really hate that I just said that. But anyways, moving on down forwards, much like the elbows, we got two joints right here that allow the knees to bend. Unlike the elbows, however, there's not much in the way of musculature blocking the movement, so therefore they're able to bend backwards almost all the ways, really, if you really want to look at it that way. So they're able to extend, and they're also able to bend in a ratchety position. There is a little bit of a soft ratchet going on the knee joints. And then as we move downwards, I actually have to skip a little ahead to the duck feet, because even though I still remain adamant to say that I don't like this design for the feet, they are, however, jointed similarly to the other Marvel Legends Spider-Man that I've covered, where they're able to pivot downwards about that far, and then forwards or upwards about that much. However, when it comes to rotating, they have that weird joint that I'm not a huge fan of, where you're basically not able to rotate the feet 360 degrees unless you bend them downwards. So if you bend them downwards like so, then you're able to take the feet and then rotate them in place on the y-axis as opposed to the x-axis. And then when you kind of bend them upwards like so, they're able to kind of pivot inwards like that and slightly outwards like that, but they're not really able to rotate. However, coming to the rescue is the re-inclusion of shin joints right there. So you can see that there's a shin cut right above the calf that allow full 360 degrees. Of course, in an awkward placement, you could notice that because of the way that the leg is sculpted, you'll have some parts kind of sticking out and things not properly lining up, but at least you do get a sense of movement there. So since you're not able to rotate the feet horizontally on the ankle joint, you are, however, still able to rotate them to some capacity via that shin joint. So because of that, there's an awful lot of great stuff happening with the articulation that again just highlights how much I'm really loving this figure, not just because of design, but also functionality. Which only makes it weird to say that this time the only real letdown that I can think of is that no real web accessories as far as any kind of attachments or bonus parts that they threw in as far as accessories are concerned. There's no web attachments or strings or threads of any kind, which is weird because this is ultimately a figure that probably would have benefited from it the most. Like, we get Cyborg Spidey with one thread and then a couple of others, like the other ones that I've covered, like Spider-Man 2099 or, with the web cape. And then, of course, you got spider armor in there, you got the black and white Spidey, etc. Here we have Black Symbiote, and yet the most that they gave him, however, is just a set of different hands. So no web attachments, unfortunately, but he does come with 2 extra pairs of hands. Beyond the fists that he comes with by default, which are basically using this similar joint that we've seen in other interchangeable hands within Marvel Legends, he also comes with the open hands, of course, to simulate that he's either wall crawling or simply just extending his hands in a dynamic pose. And then, of course, like any traditional Spider-Man figure, he's got the web shooting hands. Unfortunately, again, having web shooting hands without any proper web attachments is a little defunct, but at least these 2 extra sets of hands will allow for different dynamic poses. And thankfully, to keep the winning streak going, being able to swap out the hands in and out is a simple breeze. You just give them a slight tug. They come off very, very easily. And all you really have to do is just take one of the corresponding hands, fit them in properly, hear the little pop if need be. Sometimes you'll hear the pop, and then sometimes you'll hear the pop within your own joints trying to fit it in, but therefore they fit nice and tight. Wow, phrasing. And there you go. And it's becoming pretty obvious to see that not only the different assortment of hands, but also just the sheer amount of articulation goes a long way to give Spidey here some added personality. Beyond the poses that you can put him into, it's all about the personality that body language kind of comes through with. And it definitely helps a figure like Black Symbiote Spider-Man because it's all about the personality. It's all about the fact that the personality is changing to begin with Peter being bonded to the symbiote. And that's practically where said articulation really, really shines, as well as the overall simplistic design of the figure itself, as well as the vintage look of the combination of the traditional black suit look, as well as the actual physique coming through from the later designs that ultimately lends to one of the finer Marvel Legends that I've covered. Arguably, probably my favorite one so far. As far as the new vintage retro card, an extra web strand accessory would have been nice, but overall, this figure is ultimately nailing the standard for what I expect Marvel Legends to do from here on out. They're probably not going to be able to nail it each and every single time, but this is pretty much holding up for what is ultimately what I'm looking for in all future Marvel Legends, whether it be the ones that I have yet to cover, such as Ben Reilly, or the ones that are coming out this year, such as the Spinneret and Classic Spidey 2-pack, or the vintage one that is from the first appearance of Spidey with the web wings and the muted, darker look. This is pretty much what they're going to have to measure up to. Oh my god, I just cannot stop gushing over this Marvel Legends Black Symbiote suit Spidey, and I'm glad that I got him. And if you guys want to get him as well, be sure to use the affiliate links in the description. Trust me, if you're a Spider-Man fan, you will not regret it. Otherwise, check out this other Marvel Legends figure showing up on screen right now. And as always, stay humble, guys. I'll see you in the next one.